You're listening to the Dear Next Gen podcast with your host, Cece. This show is brought to you by Montage. We're all about bridging gaps between generations through events, stories, and conversations about real stuff. Enjoy these candid chats, and don't forget, your younger self would be proud.
Hello and welcome back to the Dear Next Gen podcast. Today I'm joined by my sibling, recurring guest, Aina. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yes. Today's episode is part of kind of like a series of sister advice. I was going to call it big sister advice, and then I realized you're not technically a big sister.
I guess not, no.
Biological, I don't know, like in that sense. So it felt funny to say that because you're my younger sister. But in general sense, you do give big sister advice and vibes.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Like,
yeah,
it's
it just felt weird because it was personally you.
Vibes, but it's funny to talk to your younger sibling saying that they're giving big sister advice.
Exactly.
When they don't have
you in that category.
Well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think of myself as a big sister either, but like I feel like obviously it makes sense anyway.
And you've been in those scenarios like when you're, we'll talk about it more like in work situations and other life situations.
Yeah,
when you're
like
the person who brings the stuff.
Give off big sis if I need to, or if I feel like someone else needs it.
Especially when it's like you bring the things that are needed, or you're like the one who's on top of the schedule or admin.
Yep, that's probably the way that I bring it the most.
Yeah. Today we are going to talk about how to be a good employee. And the reason why I wanted to do this topic was there's a lot of conversations and questions that people usually have about getting a job, and then they get into the job and things go up and down and things get messy or really great, and everybody's experience is very different. But I think there are ways to make your job enjoyable. I'm the kind of person who, as you know, if I didn't like a job, I usually would just find another one and didn't stick to it too long. But I do think that there are situations where you're supposed to like stick it out a little bit for a certain reason or a time, or and you can make it better for yourself by doing certain things, and you've experienced that. So I'll ask you kind of what your job experience world has been like, and then we can each share some tips.
Okay. I feel like I have a pretty big, surprisingly large work experience, kind of bag of goodies, I guess. And I've worked so many different jobs, and I didn't do I didn't work very much in high school. I don't think I really had any type of part-time job that wasn't like seasonal and like just, for the summer or just for, I don't know, winter, or just, a few months. But straight out of, high school, I worked all summer and then went to college. And then literally the day that I had my last day of college was 2 days before, I had the weekend, and then I started my first day of my real job, like my adult job. And that was interesting because I was 18 and I worked in, drafting in trades. How that
cute.
went.
It wasn't cute trades.
It wasn't cute
trades.
It was I'm sitting in, a shop office, sitting at a computer and being the only female youngest person in the room, in the shop, just trying to advocate for myself and not really, knowing how to at that time. And that was interesting. The thing that sucks about that is I really liked that job. Like, I did it well. Like, if if I can say that for myself, like, I know that I did well. It was, I don't know, it was something that like sometimes I would get bored of, but it wasn't bad, right? It was just the environment that kind of made it really difficult.
And it was fresh from school, like your skills that you actually knew.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of like, it was nice to feel like I was able to use some of the things that I learned in school and not feel like you know, I just went to school for all of this stuff and like it's all null now, you know, it's just kind of doing a random job that means nothing. It kind of was a little bit, because it wasn't necessarily in the same type of drafting that, you know, I should have been, you know, doing or should have been trying to do. Not that you need to be doing anything in particular, but, you know, I think that's also why it was easy to leave, right? It's like, it
wasn't your like dream path for it, but
yeah,
it was experience in that field.
It was experience in the field. I knew it was kind of like a starter job for that. But I knew that like it might not really bring me to where I want to go if I'm not like really, really ambitious about it. And that's, I feel like, you know, anyway, continuing the rest of my experience though. After that, just being like a young 18-year-old or 19 probably at that point, girl who just felt like, you know, I don't want to work with men. I don't want to be in this position. I don't want to, you know, come to a job at every day and like stay really late because, you know, I just need to get things done. Like I just didn't really want to do that at the time, and I didn't know what else to do. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go serve.
Yeah.
What do you do when you don't know what else to do? Is go work in, customer service. And that's something that I've done customer service, you know, in the jobs that I had, the random jobs I had in high school. So went to serve. I actually really, really enjoyed serving. And so, you know, when I
You actually were really good at that too.
That's the thing is like, I found out that, you know, I guess that's kind of where I learned the things that I was like good at. You know, I found out my strengths, my weaknesses, things that I struggled with, and things that I probably was like, I don't know, better with figuring out for myself. And yeah, no, you learn so much when you work in the food in like service industry, honestly, like whether you're a server or like work in kitchens and stuff, you just learn so much. And there's just a lot of experience there and a lot of perspective that you gain. So, you know, I really like that. And yeah, I felt like I was pretty good at it anyway. So I served at like 3-4 different places over the span of, it's funny because it feels a lot longer, but it was less than a year total.
Oh, really?
But it was just so much
it
felt like so much of my life. But I think it was just like such a big chunk of my like early 20s, I guess. I don't know. And then I worked retail because I was like, I am kind of, you know, tired of having these hours for serving. And I was the last place I was serving at was kind of different. It wasn't just like me and a bunch of people. I was the only server there, and I did like everything. And it was a lot of pressure to work, you know, directly with the owners. It was really nice sometimes. It was like they were great people, but it was it was a lot of pressure sometimes.
With a bunch of people your age, and it's fun.
Exactly. It was like I'm there on my own, just kind of hoping that the customers kind of fulfill my cup, like the social part of it that I really liked, right? Because that's a huge part of it, is like actually serving the people and being with people and the people that you're working with, and kind of growing different types of, you know, relationships with them. And I wasn't really able to do that at that job. And I was doing split shifts, which also really, really suck, especially in the summertime. And it's hot, and, you know, you wish you weren't like off in the middle of the day and then working in the evening. Working in the morning, off in the middle of the day, and then working again in the evening, and then you just don't really have time to do anything, or it feels that way anyway. But yeah, so after that, like I got the opportunity. Well, it's not like it's a huge opportunity to work retail, but someone like was like, "Hey, you want to work retail? Like we're hiring. I'll like, you know, you want to come here? I feel like you have enough experience. Like I know you haven't done retail before, but like you could learn. You could see if you like it." And then I did that, and I started off just kind of working and as a associate, and then I became the assistant manager after, I don't know, honestly don't know how many months that was. All of that is a little bit of a blur timeline wise. But yeah, then I was the assistant manager at a shoe store. That was also a really big learning experience, you know, learning leadership, learning leadership in a, you know, different kind of way than I've ever done, because I had never been someone's supervisor or anything like that. Especially your peers, right? Like some people you started working with when you were new, and then you become their supervisor and manager. Sometimes it's like, it's, you know, it's something to figure out. And
it's a dynamic change for sure.
Yeah, the dynamic change is something to, you know, kind of learn. And but yeah, like I feel like working there in that position and the timeline and everything that I did, like I learned so much. And I think that job and that position really equipped me for, I don't know, other customer service, like trying to actually expand my, you know, trying to expand my actual like job range within customer service, right? Not like I could just go work at another retail store. I could just work at another restaurant. I feel like that job really equipped me to be like, you know, I could do something actually like fully different, not like what people mean as in like, oh, you work in customer service, like you work at a store, right? Which
you're
is
limited to totally, just a store.
Yeah, like which is totally like something that people will enjoy doing. And, you know, there are people who could be doing that for, you know, their entire career, and that's great. And I feel like if things were different at that store, I probably would have been there for much longer. I think I would have, you know, if it wasn't so corporate and, you know, I didn't really have the opportunity to like, I don't know, get given what I was worth, you know, the work that I was getting told to do or asked to do, demanded to do. If I was getting compensated or just kind of like appreciated a little bit more, I think I probably would have stayed there a little bit longer. But yeah, no, I feel like working there and going through the things I did go through at, you know, being an assistant manager, not even a manager, an assistant manager in like a corporate retail job was like, yeah, it was somewhere where I really learned a lot about like advocating for myself, you know, being a leader and advocating for the people that I'm leading, right? Like having colleagues that are friends and learning how to deal with that, and, you know, how to talk to higher up managers and like all of these things that I had never really experienced before. And yeah, no, I feel like that really equipped me for what I was going to do next. And, you know, at that point I was doing, when I decided to leave that job, I didn't really know what I was going to do next, because it was just kind of one of those things where I was like, this is affecting my mental health, my personal life, my family, so many things, so much, that especially around COVID time, right? Like after coming back from COVID, the demands that we were getting for what we could really do in that job was just not, it just wasn't worth it, right? Like the amount of hours that they would ask me to work, and I'm like, you won't give me a raise. Like you like, you know, like just so many things about that is like, you're demanding me to work all of these hours but telling me that we don't have the hours, and getting upset that we're scheduling people for them, like just doesn't really make sense. So there were so many parts of that where it just eventually made me kind of decide like, I need to go. I just need to go, because if I don't, I'm going to be here forever and just feeling this way, right? Because
and be miserable.
We tried to like fight for a long time and nothing was changing. So anyway, after that I was like, you know what, I'm going to work for myself. It's COVID. I don't know what else to do. I'm going to work for myself. Yeah, so I was doing interior design for myself. That was a whole adventure that I'm still trying to figure out. But, you know, someone's got to pay the bills, and remote jobs were starting to become like, it seemed more accessible, right? Because so many jobs started to be more remote during COVID. But also just, I don't know, I think because of like my experience and what I had learned at my retail job, I felt like I was finally in the position to kind of put myself out there and not feel like I was so underqualified for everything. So, so now like I worked customer support for a background check company for 2 years. Unfortunately, I got laid off from that. I learned so much from that job. Like so many different things that were, yeah, just, I don't know, like working in the corporate world for the first time, in the tech industry for the first time, in an all online and like remote job for the first time. All of these things, like I was experiencing so many firsts at this job and went through so many ups and downs, and like I feel like I handled it pretty well. And I feel like I handled it pretty well, but yeah, like there were so many new things. And I feel like that's an interesting thing, I guess, about, you start a new job, like when you do start new jobs, you just learn a lot of new things, obviously, and you kind of like, I don't know, there's always something different going on, right, in these different jobs, or there's something that's exactly the same as your last job, and I don't know, that'll affect you as well. But especially with all the jobs that I've had, I think because of them all mostly being like customer service, but different types of customer service, or a different, type of environments, I feel like, even though I feel like my resume is a little bit too long sometimes with like short, stunts of, experience at places, like all of those places had such different experiences where I feel like I learned a lot of new tools for myself anyway. And
transferable tools.
Yeah. Transferable
one job
tools.
to the next job.
Yeah, exactly. From one job to the next job. And also just for myself as an employee, specifically for myself, advocating for myself, knowing when to speak, knowing maybe when not to speak, what, I don't know, things to be aware of, things to keep an eye out for. But yeah, anyway, I did that for like 2 years, got laid off because, it's the tech industry,
because everybody customer got laid support off in the world.
Yeah, because everyone was getting laid off. Literally, I took an Uber when I was visiting you, or when I was seeing you one time, and the Uber driver asked me where I was coming from, or if I was there for work or whatever. Started talking to him about work, and I told him, I was like, okay, well, I don't work in tech. Like, I hate telling people that I work in tech because it makes me seem like a lot more, like high up or like interesting.
In the last little while, that has been your job. Yeah, your field, like where your industry is.
But it's funny because, yeah, that's just like the actual industry that, the company that I worked for was a part of. And they were a tech startup. Like literally they were a tech startup, like giant, right? So it was funny because the guy in the Uber was like, oh, he's like, aren't you worried about layoffs? And that was like this guy he foresaw my future, because little did I know, a few months later he was going to be right, that
he's right.
who's going to get laid off first in the tech industry is if they have customer support, you can outsource that easy. So anyway, we that happened, and now I'm at a new job. I've been there for like a month, and
nice.
One thing, I don't love starting new jobs. That's kind of the funny thing about me having so many jobs in the last 5-6 years. I really don't like starting new jobs. Like, I love getting, I don't know, learning things in a new job and getting to use those things, like getting to work on them, getting to develop. Like that's, I don't know, I feel like that's when I feel the best. That's why I felt like I was getting in a groove at my last job before I got laid off. And
like in the same company, but you're learning new stuff. You like that?
Yeah, exactly. I like that, and just kind of adding on to the what's the word? Like the expertise that, you're starting to learn, right? Especially, when you get into something like background checks, or like even when I was in retail and I worked doing shoe stuff, like that's so silly, but I learned so many things about feet and shoes.
You did.
And it's really
and how
useful.
To care for shoes, how to like protect your shoes and like maintain shoes. I
really
was shocked.
Useful stuff. Yeah, no, anyway, see, that's funny because you asked about my work experience, and I've gone on for literally so long because there's so many jobs that I've had.
But it's good context. That's good context. I think it's good context. Yeah. And I also, like, I've always thought, like, oh yeah, I need to do an episode, or I'll just like record later and add it to this. I just want to call it to all the jobs I've had before.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Because I just
oh my goodness. I should.
We've both had so many jobs.
Yeah, you like that. It's so funny because you also have like we both had so many jobs in like very different but similar.
Similar things, or we have job experiences that we've both done, but like we don't really put that in the resume. Like, oh, we've done food trucks. Oh, we both tutored. Like we both...
Where did you start your your employment career?
Yeah,
like just your entire career. It's like, oh, I did it. I spent my entire summer in food truck. Yeah, food trucks was our life.
Yeah,
so weird. Like a whole
summer
other
camps.
Part.
Like I get paid $100 for a whole week of summer camp.
I did not get paid for summer camp.
You're too young.
I guess I didn't do those ones. By the time I was old enough. I only did the volunteer ones.
It might be because I was telling Johnny, I was like, oh, I have so much experience. Like I always thought I'd be a teacher, but I think doing all the practice teaching made me realize I don't want to be a teacher.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We've done so much.
Teach people.
Yeah, you like, both of us, but mostly you. We did a lot of volunteering with kids, and it was just kind of a default. Like we weren't really asking to do it. It was just kind of like, it's summertime. It's time to do this. It's like, yeah. It's time to do camp, right? Like it's time to do camp.
Your parents do, so you're getting dropped off.
Yeah. You're going with her, or you're doing absolutely nothing all summer. Like, okay, we'll go with mom. We'll take care of the kids, and obviously, like we enjoyed it. It's not. It's just I think it makes sense that it would make you realize that like maybe this isn't something I want to do like all the time.
I'm glad I can do it. I learned something. Yeah. The admin side, the curriculum prep, like things like that. I'm like, I now know how to do so much of that because of what we did before. It's also interesting because like obviously Aina and I share the same like parents, but I was going to say that who you're around like family wise or community wise also can affect like your confidence in applying for jobs and your just like encouragement to do jobs and what a job means. Because I do know people who it's like you have to get a job because like we weren't rich or anything, but I didn't feel like we had the pressure of like if you do not get a job right now, like there's like you're in so much trouble or things like that. Like you didn't work in high school. I worked in high school because I had a probably spending problem. I just wanted to buy what I wanted. And
you wanted to go shopping.
I want to shop. So if you want to shop, you have to work, which is why I worked at Orange Julius. But even now, I'm like, some kids just want to work and get more jobs for fun. Like kids, I mean like teenagers and just the next generation. Or some people are just like, oh, my parents like will not let me live at home unless I get a job or whatever the kind of situation is. So like for both of us, it felt like we were encouraged to do what we wanted, but also like our family they're like hustlers, they're entrepreneur vibes.
Yeah, it's something that I think about a lot now, especially, as someone who just, I don't know, I've had to job hunt like a few times and just even thinking about like what I want to do with those things. And I thought about that a lot about, like, I don't know, just how when I was a teenager, when I was in high school, when I was growing up, like I was never really, not like I wasn't pushed to get a job, right? I wasn't pushed to have jobs and all that. And I feel like sometimes I feel like that's an issue that I have, right? Where like I had to learn all of these things as an adult when I was already, I don't know if I'm explaining properly, but like sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I should have tried to have a job. Maybe, like I see people who have been working for, most of their lives at this point because they started working at like 15 and they worked like a part-time job like every weekend or something, right? And I know that those people probably have very different experience and like perspective and learned a lot of different things because and for themselves, right? Like a routine and accountability, those type of things for themselves that they've learned when they were a little bit younger. But at the same time, I feel like, we had other things that did teach us that as well. And I don't know, every family's different. All parents are different. And I don't know, it's hard to not like, I think, it's hard to not compare those things and think about it too much. But it's at the same time, like I feel like because we weren't pushed to have jobs all the
Wi-Fi cut
time.
out.
Oh,
Wait,
do you hear me?
I feel like the way this thing records is that it's gonna save it anyways, but
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening with it. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I feel like we like not being pushed to have a job though definitely helped. Like, I don't know, I feel like we grew up with a lot of, you need to make your own, like, you in the end you make your own decisions and you just kind of learn from that, right? Like, you learn what happened from that, what caused this, like, I don't know, just kind of, you make, in the end it's your own decision and you have to take from that what you know, think.
But there was also support of like, oh, we'll give you, like, if we have a connection, we'll give it to you, or
Oh yeah,
if
exactly.
we see
It's
an
just kind of
opportunity,
like
we'll give that to you, but then it's
Yeah.
all on you. It
exactly.
Like, okay.
Then it's all on you, and like if that's something you want to, like, you know, put your responsibility on, then like go ahead. But if you don't want to anymore, like, we won't be mad, right? Like, that was kind of a nice thing growing up. It was like we had such random sporadic jobs, like tutoring for, you know, 5-6 months and then nothing anymore, and then I don't know, like working at the mall but not at a store, not working at the mall at the store. Working at the mall
for
Santa
photos for a month.
pictures, right, for like a month, and I feel like we learn a lot from even working those specific types of jobs too. Like, I don't know, like sometimes I feel like oh, maybe I'm missing, you know, skills, or, you know, skills being developed as much as maybe they should be now because I didn't start working early enough. But
especially because both of us didn't do like full degrees either.
Yes,
I think
and that's a
that
whole
can
other
come
part,
behind
right?
your mind. Yeah, that's a whole other part. You can sometimes be like, oh, I didn't travel enough. I didn't work young enough. Oh, I didn't get a degree. Like, maybe I didn't. But all this to say that experiences are actually, if you sit down and think about what you learned in those experiences, it's a lot.
Exactly. And like, you know, there's a lot when we were, you know, in high school and like teenagers, where even if we weren't working that entire time or any of that, we had a lot of other things that we decided that we were going to take responsibility for and take on and put ourselves in, you know, situations and, you know, well, extracurriculars, right? Like, we put ourselves in other situations where we learn a lot of different things versus and a lot of similar things, just in different ways, right? Than having to go to a job.
I can connect so much of the free stuff I've done, like knowing how to call. Like, when I pick up the phone to call something, and I watch Johnny like listen to me, I feel like I'm like a different person, because I'm like, oh, now I'm putting on the not customer service voice, but
not
like
the customer
service
voice, the opposite.
Inquired customer, like who needs to leave this conversation with an answer or with a solution.
How do I communicate to someone who is trying to help me? Right?
And how do I get that? How do I place an order efficiently? And I'm like, that's because in high school we were ordering food for hundreds of people. Like,
my goodness, yes. We were like going out using the connections, you know, trying to find connections to get something for everyone, like trying to plan all of these things and make work orders for things, you know, place orders for all these things, go pick things up at you know, make time schedules, appointments, schedules.
So maybe that's like the main tip, honestly, is if you want to be a good employee, think about all the things that like you've done in the past, not even just paid, like actually different projects you've done, different extracurriculars, like you said, and see where that can apply in your job to give you a bit of confidence in, like, even if it's your first actual paid job. You're like, okay, I just got a job. I'm a host at a restaurant, or I work at this like local coffee shop. Well, that's not technically your first job, because you've done other things. Like, you've done other things at home or in projects or at school, like time management. Even if you've taken transit, you know more than somebody who hasn't taken transit and like go to work, because now you know how to read a schedule, like your own time management and how to pack certain things for the day and be prepared. So anyways, that's some advice.
There's so many skills that I think it's hard to remember that you've gained when you feel like you don't have enough work experience or school experience, you know, like, or, you know, the extra education and all of that, it's really easy to forget about everything else in life that you might have gone through that would help, you know, help you, I guess, see yourself and advocate for yourself, because that's a huge part of, you know, working and trying to find jobs, trying to make sure that you can keep your job or you're good at your job, or like just trying to kind of maneuver all of that. And I think even if you can't put something, or even if you don't feel like you can put something in your resume, it's still, I don't know, it's still worth continuing to remember those things when it comes to actually going to an interview, or, you know, talking to your manager when you're already at a job.
Yeah. If you already got a job from a connection and they just hired you because they knew your parent or they knew your sibling, that doesn't mean that it stops there with what you advocate and what you share about what you're knowledgeable in.
Exactly.
That was Ina's main tip, was always advocate for yourself. So
that's a big one for me these days.
That's a big one. And especially because, well, we're also very different. Like, I tried to serve and I lasted 1 week. Hated the restaurant industry. Absolutely hate the restaurant industry. People thought, oh, she's outgoing. I think like she'll like this job. I nailed
it made sense why you got that job. I thought it was like, it made sense at the time, and then when you lasted a week, I realized that actually made more sense.
Yeah, I was so drained. I hated my life. I hated the scheduling. I hated not knowing when you're off, because you can just get like cut whenever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love that either. That's kind of the negative parts of it. But that makes sense.
Some
like,
people survive,
for you, if that really wasn't it.
It really, like, I just could not. Like, I just realized in that moment, I'm like, I'm way more introverted than I think, because I had just come from like a reception job where, yes, I greet people, but like 10 minutes and you do chit chat and you don't talk for an hour because you're doing your paperwork, you're doing your like, you know, your own independent ADHD tasks. But this point, like when you're actually serving, you're on when you have tables, and when you don't, you're still talking to a coworker. And I was like, I can't do this.
It's a lot of like separating and compartmentalizing and in a very specific way when you serve.
Yes.
Especially when you serve somewhere that's busy.
Exactly. Which is honestly nicer than somewhere that's dead.
Yes.
So that's also why I chose a place that like seemed bumping, and I was like, no, this is not for me. Yeah. But also I'm like, we're opposite in a way where like you've had to build your confidence in certain things sometimes. So that's why advocating for yourself is really big.
Yeah,
for
definitely.
you.
Those type of jobs helped me too, versus like, you know, like I started and I was like, oh, this is like a lot. Like, I'm not used to this, you know, having to talk to people all the time and et cetera, and dealing with issues and all of that. And for me, those type of jobs really helped me build my confidence and, you know, not get out of my shell necessarily, but, you know, get out of the like anxious shell and all that, versus, you know, maybe that would have helped you with other things as well. But I like, it makes sense that it wasn't necessarily the thing.
Yeah, I knew, I'm like, I could do anything. I was like, I could do anything. That's like how I think. I'm like, oh, I like whatever it is, I probably could do it and be very successful. Anybody can. But when I got to that, I was like, I don't actually enjoy my life right now. And I know there's other things like that are very reachable that I could do and enjoy, and like not go down like a mental health spiral. So then that's something
so important to, I think, also remember, is like sometimes there are things that like we kind of, I don't know, we kind of tell ourselves we need to like, what's the term? You have to like just stick to it, you know, just kind of like do it, right? Just endure whatever you're going through. Like, this job is like what you need for the experience, or like it's gonna get better. Sometimes there are like, a lot of time there are situations like that where, you know, you just have to work through it. Like, I had that in my last job where I just had to kind of stick through a really difficult part where I was like, this is a lot of not what I expected. And then eventually I was like, okay, you know, like things change, things pass, like all of these, you know, whatever reasons. But sometimes like it's also totally okay to have the realization that this is not the thing for you, and it's not worth it. Like, you can definitely get what you need somewhere else. and learn somewhere else in a different way.
It can
and
be scary for sure. I've talked to people who commute over 2 hours to work, and to me it's easier for me because I've experienced like what it's like to be like, oh, I have to leave this job and I don't have something lined up, but then things work out and something happens, or you reach out to other people and then you find a job because you realize, oh, the time I'm commuting is 4 hours of my day and my shift is 5 hours, so I'm really not making any money anymore, time wise or lifestyle wise. But I can see why those people are stuck in the moment of I can't, I have to just stick it out. Like, this is all I deserve, all I can get right now. I've tried applying for months and months, and part of me is like, yes, but don't get stuck in that and just sit there and be like, this is what it is. If you get really comfortable in that, you're going to just stay there forever. That's just how it usually happens.
Definitely. And like, it's really common too. And, you know, especially, I don't know, like myself having had so many different types of jobs, like it's something that I've gone through, you know, in between jobs sometimes. And it's really hard to get yourself out of that sometimes. And you just kind of have to, I don't know, you just kind of have to, like, again, a part of my advocate for yourself, right? It's not just to others, it's like to yourself, right? Like, even if this is hard right now, like, I don't know, even if the process is not nice, like it's hard. And sometimes it takes time. Sometimes you're not finding the right place. Like sometimes it's just not the right place at the right time, right? Like it's just going to happen
sometimes
differently.
It's a temporary thing and you need to have a plan and surround yourself with people who are going to like lift you up and not just be like, oh, well, this is what it is. Like, just stick it out because the job economy sucks. So anyways, your main tip was like advocate. My main tip is actually for the time where you're looking for a job, or if you're like in that phase where you don't really enjoy your job right now and you're just trying to be a good employee, but you're like, I don't like this, is to rely on connections or people, or speak up about it outside of work, and like not at work, but outside of work, and just be like, hey, I'm looking for something more like this. Like, do you know anybody? Or like, does your family know anybody? Or
put it
like,
out there.
Put it out there. And yes, you could do a lot of just like online searching, but to be honest, like applying online, I've been the person on the other side too now. So I know getting 200 applications, even if you have AI, is so stressful. Like somebody could be a perfect fit in there and I might just not see it. I might not have time because I'm also working during that.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Not everywhere has one person whose sole job is to be recruiting and hiring. Like most places, most companies, businesses, they're, unless it's like a huge corporate company, there probably isn't one person going through all of these all day, every day.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, it comes down to sometimes connections, because then you get pushed forward, or sometimes just like ending up at the right place at the right time, messaging at the right contact, or sending a personalized thing outside of just like the upload PDF resume section. But let's say you get the job. I'll say my 2 tips for after that, and then you can say yours. My good employee tip, other than rely on connections, is to be the person who does the most but have boundaries. And that is because I've worked like corporate jobs where I had a salary and a set amount of hours technically. I've also done a lot of freelance work where you commit to a certain amount of hours and nobody's really checking, like clocking into your hours. So I say, oh, I'm going to work 20 hours a week, 15 hours a week for your company and 15 hours for another company. If I don't have boundaries, I could be working 40 hours for that company because nobody's really like time tracking. That makes sense. Like if I'm not time tracking, they're not time tracking. They're just giving me tasks and tasks and tasks. And yes, I want to be a great like employee and a great person to bring my skills and have all my deliverables done. I also need boundaries to be like, hey, I'm not gonna, if I told you I'm working like, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday on your guys' work, or if I'm only a part-time worker, I need to be the person with the boundaries to go, okay, that means I don't pick up the phone Saturday unless I get time off on another day. Or that means I need to not just be like the first person to reply on Slack if I'm like doing a bunch of other stuff that I'm swamped with from them. Like, it's different if it's your own thing, like you're in an appointment and then you get a message from work and you do that. But it's very common for people in our generation to be eager and grateful to do their job, get scared that everybody's replaceable. So they do the most, which I think is really good for standing out, is like always have a good attitude when you're doing the most and just doing your job plus a little bit more. When you're doing a little bit more, I don't mean like do so much that now they always expect you to do this much in this scope. I mean, do your job and then tell them, oh, I also had extra time to do this, like whatever, or I had this idea about this. What do you think? I could work on it if I finish next week at this time. So just have the boundaries of, I'm not just available any hours of the day at midnight to do anything at the drop of a hat, because then when there's actually an emergency, they just assume you're going to do it versus, hey, we really appreciated you doing this for us, or can you come to this evening event instead, and whatever this looks like, or we really need somebody to cover a shift.
Those things like that specifically is, I think, like you said, our generation is so, like, we've become so used to that, and unfortunately that's become like the big that's become like a really common thing, and like a lot of us are people pleasers, even if we're not a people pleaser outside of work. Like, you just kind of become that at your job a lot of the time if you if you feel any of those things, and it's those not having those boundaries or not like realizing, not doing something about it is what's going to get you burnt out as well, right? Like, if you're eager, you especially if you like your job, it's easy to do that, unfortunately, right? It's easy to do more.
I always like
than
my job.
What you
That's
need to
problem.
do. Yeah, and like that's something that I had an issue with too. Like, when I was at the shoe store, is like I actually really enjoyed what I was doing. I was like, sure, I'll come in. I'll do the conference call. Like, that's totally fine. But really, I've worked over 50 hours this week and I'm at home. It's my day off, and like all these things. But like, it eventually it's going to catch up to you, and it's not going to feel that way anymore if you do that. If you don't set those boundaries.
Protect your peace and enjoyment of the job. The other one that I wanted to add was, to be a good employee, you should be reliable. And that is something that I've learned the hard way. I've learned through management. I've learned through myself being like, oh, I need to be obvious that I'm reliable, because I always think of myself as reliable just with the way, like we talked about all our job experiences. Like, you have a lot of weight on your shoulders when you're dealing with other people's money, like a business, protocols, and budgets from like a school, or responsibility for an event to happen. You have to be reliable, but to prove to an employer that you are reliable actually takes time and it takes work. And they don't hire people knowing that, oh, this person's going to be a 10 out of 10 reliable employee. They just hire based off of whatever impression you gave, your background, your interview. So we've seen this in management too. Like, if you want to be reliable, I think you need to be very communicative. Is that a word? With
communicative.
Time off. If you can say that you need time off ahead of time, that is much less anxiety inducing than doing it the morning of. And there's just so much respect when people give me a heads up when I've managed about their vacation or potential okay, I might have to drive my sibling to this. Like, a heads up is great. And because there are going to be times where you need to do a last minute emergency, and you don't want to be the person who does that so often. So the least you could do that, the better. And the more just clear you are about what's happening. You don't even have to be super, like, I feel like our generation is like, I have to be sick because of I'm sick because this, like, this is why I'm at the bathroom, or my stomach hurts, I have cramps. Like, you don't always have to say that. In a lot of companies, you just clock in, I'm sick, or I'm taking a day off in 5 days. And then if they ask you, oh, what are you up to that day? It's totally up to you. Like, oh, I already booked something, or my family's in town. Like, you don't have to justify your time off, especially if you are entitled to sick days or time off or vacation, or you don't work full time.
Yeah, and if they are bothering you about that, then that's another issue. It's not about you not being, not being a good employee, really, or
exactly.
Yeah.
It's just pressure from above. And I also mean reliable in terms of like project deadlines. If you can do one thing, I would say, is be the person who communicates with your supervisor or with your team before they have to communicate and ask you a question, because that makes you not only seem reliable, it makes you seem organized, and it also proves that you have some sort of like project and time management. And an example is, I'm like, hey, Aina, can you work on this? We need it by the end of this month. And then a week later, after I assign it to you and ask you to do this project, you come to me and say, hey, I'm 50% done. Like, this is where I'm at. Do you have this? I need this for that. Or I might be done sooner than I thought, or it's going to take me more time. This is like just a weekly update or any kind of update before I have to go to you and go, hey, how's it going? Like, haven't heard from you. You might be working super hard on it. You might have your head down and be like, I'm hustling over here. But me having to ask you is more anxiety inducing for you, because maybe you're like stressed and you're like, doesn't she understand I'm like doing it already all day? And then it's awkward for me, or it just gives the oversight, like the thought that they have to always check in on you, and you don't want that. If you want to be independent, like I've worked so independently in big situations, small situations, because I'm the over updater, where like every Monday I'm like, here's the 3 things I did, and like I'll be done on these days. And then I also give them a deadline that's a bit later than I'll probably be done, just to be safe, just because I've screwed myself over before. But I'll be like, I'll probably have it all done by Friday, and then it's like Wednesday night and I'm like, oh, I'm actually done. Like either I say something or I don't. And I can just update them, and then I feel good. They're not coming to ask me, because when they go and like send me a message, they can see, oh yeah, she said Friday anyways, or whatever day it was.
Yeah, I think that's especially if you do a lot of project-based work. It's all to make sure that you aren't putting other people, like putting thoughts into other people's heads when like you know, you don't necessarily need to try really hard to not do that, but at the same time, like if you have like deadlines that you're just trying to get to, if you're communicative and like just honest, and like then it shows them that you're respecting their time and your own, right? Like you're respecting like, I don't know, it shows a lot of respect, I think, and you know, and integrity with just how you handle things. And it helps with communication. It helps to avoid, you know, causing more problems, because first of all, if you didn't meet a deadline and you didn't say anything about it, that's not great. You know, it's not really great.
Yeah, it's worse to be on the day of and say something.
But you know, if you know in advance that you're not going to have time for something, if you realize halfway through or even like the day before that like, hey, I am not done. I am not done. It's like, it's also like, I feel like a lot of people probably experience this in school, right? When you have a project and you do it at the last minute, and then you come to school the next day and you tell your teacher like, I didn't do it, right? I'm not done. And they're like, why didn't you say anything? I think that's something that, you know, a lot of people, if they've experienced that in school, then maybe, you know,
you bring it into your work life.
Like it's possibly something you bring into your work life, or it's something that you just realize that you did do and now you try to change, right? Or you're hyper aware.
Oh, the amount of times that I've gone to a teacher like 3 days before, and I just knew already I wouldn't be done. But surprisingly, it was not really an issue, because they would rather be done and well. And then they would see like, okay, like they'd help me. They'd be like, what is actually taking up most of your time? I'm like, I signed up to do this and it was too much. Or we have this homework and I'm just like a slow reader or whatever. And even if you're doing a job where you stock shelves for shoes, groceries, you're in a bakery, if someone asks you like, hey, can you deep clean everything before you're off work? And there's a million customers and you're going to be off in 5 minutes. It's better that earlier, like when you see the customer rush and you walk by your manager, you go, hey, I don't know if I can do like this thing today, but like my next shift is tomorrow at 2. Like, can I do it then? Or can we assign it to somebody else? Like they'll help you find a solution. You don't have to find the solution. Just deal with your current mess.
That's another, that's a huge part of it too, is like, if you don't have a solution, usually that's fine, as long as you bring it up in the way that like you want to find a solution, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is what's happening right now. I'm not able to get this done in the way that you have just requested, by this time in this way or whatever, it is. And like, what can, like, what should I do about it? What can we do about it? Or, if you're proactive, or you just already have been able to think about another option or a new date, right? You can say,
Yeah, then you can say that.
I realize, I don't know, like, if it's, like, needing to submit something for your job.
Give a suggestion, yeah.
Like, just say, like, hey, like, I've just been really busy. Like, things have been really crazy. You don't need to say too much. You just let them know whatever reason it is, generally, or just that you couldn't get it done on time. But, you think that you can get it done by Sunday and that you'll get back to them, before
follow
then.
up.
You'll follow up with them. Even if you aren't actually sure if you're going to be done by that time, you find like a realistic time and, tell them that you're going to follow up with them on it. Or, tell them that you're going to check in with them. And that's totally fine. And they would rather have you communicate with them than hear nothing. And then, you don't meet the deadline and they've been expecting this because you didn't say anything, they've been expecting, right?
There's no room for them to kind of adjust. You might not actually even be paid to come up with a solution. Like, that's what management does sometimes. And if you're just a part-time worker working after school, or like doing a little an administrative gig here and there, and you're like off the rest of the days, like, they can find a solution. But you being a good employee by communicating is very very important. And you know what, even if you miss a lot of days for work because of personal things, or you didn't get a lot done because the company was just so busy in general, you will get probably better reference like out of that person than if you didn't do this, to be honest.
For sure.
Even if you've had like a chaotic life season and you leave, they can still be like, hey, she was really reliable and great at communicating with me.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
That
Especially
was good.
Like, a lot of managers, bosses and all that, if they're not, just terrible right off the bat, like, most managers are just people as well, right? And they probably have done references a lot, or they've done just interviews a lot and stuff like that. So a lot of the time even if there's something like, if you called in sick a lot, or if you told them you couldn't work a lot of the time that it seemed like they might have wanted you to, if you show those other things, especially the reliability, and reliability in communication, right?
And the initiative
and just like respect, those things, like, they will go such a long way with a manager, especially when it comes to, how they treat you when you're there and how useful they can be after, right?
Yeah,
as
I would recommend somebody, if they told me, hey, I want to work for you, but turns out, like, they start working for me and they have a sport and the sport schedule is like insane. But if they email me the sports schedule or come to me and tell me, like,
super
hey,
useful.
I know, like, I have whatever sports so crazy, but these are the few dates I can work, and they tell me ahead of time, like, I would still recommend that person to other people if they did their job good, even if they weren't super available in that season, because that has nothing to do with me giving them a referral. Like, I'm not going to call the other company and be like, oh, well, they weren't available all of July. Like, well, I knew back in May that they weren't available all of July because they told me and all that.
And they were proactive about it.
Exactly. I want to make sure you can go to work. So you tell us your last 2 tips before we wrap up.
Yes, true. I have to work after this. So my second tip was, don't be too shy to ask questions or, bring up concerns that you have. That's something that, a lot of, people pleasers and other, anxious people might experience a lot or have experienced in the past. And, like, I guess most of my tips too are things, that I've had to overcome myself. Right. So, don't be too shy. I feel like it kind of speaks for itself, but at the same time, it's so easy sometimes to feel like you need to be complacent about the things that are going on at a job, right?
And then you complain to your coworkers and friends.
Yeah, and then you complain to your coworkers and friends, or you don't, and it really, really affects you personally, right? Especially if you kind of try to tell yourself it's okay and don't complain about it. It's funny because, complaining about it sometimes is just what you need. and you don't need to, sometimes it's a situation where you don't need to do much about it. It's just kind of like, this is just an annoying thing. It's not really something that, would make a difference if it changed, besides me just not being annoyed for myself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not actually an issue sometimes. But, when it is something that you actually have a concern about, like, always, like, again, like I said earlier about another manager thing, is like, of course, depends on your manager. It depends on the person that you're higher up that you need to speak to. But usually, if they are just a normal person, generally they're just a person and they haven't been specifically really negative, about things that you've seen or towards people, right? They're there for you to talk to them, right? Your and if you don't know, if you have like a supervisor that you feel like you trust, go talk to your supervisor about what to do about that concern, right? Do I go talk to the manager? I don't know, like as someone who worked as an assistant manager somewhere and supervisor, I wasn't the highest person to be speaking to, but that's something that I learned a lot in that position, was that like, it's, if people trust you as well, like they'll trust, I don't know, like it's a nice middle person to talk to as well.
Yeah, they'll be comfortable, right? Like, to talk to
hey,
you.
I have this thing going on and I just don't know how to bring it up to the manager. Like, what do you think? Right.
And if it makes sense, it's not like your adjacent coworker who's just going to gossip. Like, be strategic.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think like just making sure that you bring things up, because if you don't bring something up and the time passes and it's too late, that's going to affect you in the long run. And or most likely if it's something, that you felt like you should bring up or that you're concerned about. And, you might miss out on things. You might miss out on opportunities. You might miss out on being able to, like my first tip is, advocate for yourself, right? Because you're not bringing things up and you're just kind of letting yourself fall into the background, and that can lead to just a lot of resentment towards yourself too, right? And then lack of confidence.
Yeah. You might also be helping the company by bringing certain things up, because when you're in a place where things have been running the same and being the same, like, there's a respectful way to bring stuff up, and there's also suggestions that you can bring to make things better. Corporate world, we call it optimizing, and optimizing the systems and finding new processes. Like, even in retail, like when I worked at Urban Outfitters or American Eagle, we would find better ways to make it like more fun to do things. We'd be like, okay, like overnight floor changes, like, let's actually like let somebody be in charge of the playlist for an hour, so then it's more fun. And that's because we were falling asleep, like it's a small thing that I realized. I'm like, if we don't have food, everything's closed, and we don't have good music, we're dying here. So let's change it up, and it works.
Especially if you're in like the position where you, or just like you're the type of person who just likes to, solve problems, or just that you're in the position where you notice something and you feel like everyone's getting frustrated about something. You feel like there's something that could be done, or you hear from a manager or a supervisor that they're complaining about something, right? And you, being in the position that you're in, have thoughts on that. It's of course you have to think about how you're going to communicate things always. Make sure that you're filtering yourself, not gossiping while you're communicating, of course. But like, if you're in that position, like, it's never a bad thing to just speak up with ideas that you have. Like, whether or not it's used, I think as long as you're not kind of, using it in a certain way, or, kind of bringing it up in a negative way, it's always useful. Like, I've found in the past, it has brought me a lot of movement, and notice, like, when I started to speak up, I started to get promoted. I started to get noticed more. And like, that's not like a really, like, if you speak up, you're going to get promoted. Like, not necessarily that, but it's like you
will be considered for opportunities, for sure.
And not even just like considered for opportunities. People, like, your peers and your management will start to consider like more about you, you know, like not just consider you for opportunities, but they will start to, like, you're gonna stand out in a different way, right? Like not just stand out like because you, I don't know, you're great at your job, but specifically about those type of things. I mean, like this person has like really, like this person thinks about these things, this person felt the need to bring it up, like bring something up, I'm gonna go ask them what they think about something, right? I have this thing that I'm trying to implement, why don't I talk to this person to see what they think, or for this person to test it out, like, and that brings you
we've been
so
already
much.
talking about this. We've been talking about this, but this person, you know, expressed interest who's new, like let's bring her on the project, or let me just ask her advice.
It could do not much, but it can also do so much good. Like it's definitely better to bring something up when you have ideas, thoughts, concerns, versus just letting things stay the same and, you know, not changing, especially if it's something that really is negative or you feel like is affecting not only yourself but others, right?
Yeah. Because you can definitely clock into your Starbucks shift and clock out, or you can clock in and like enjoy yourself and leave a positive impact and change, and then clock out still.
And
Thanks,
then
sibling.
And sorry, I guess my last one, because I guess that was my second one. My last one was pretty similar to yours though, so I won't talk about it too much. Is basically like notify or like bring things up as early as possible. Like especially if you don't have a cool, chill millennial manager. Especially like if you do have manager one, memes, please make sure.
Me. I'm like eating on the call.
I always think of you when I see those, because I'm like, oh, I wish that like my real manager was like, I'll think about how you are with your, you know, your people. And I'm like, if only my manager was like in the similar situation, a similar type of person, similar age, all that, like just generation. Not that, you know, I've had bad managers or that they're like not good, but sometimes, you know, you think about that and you're like, oh, it would be so much easier to, you know, manage these things that I'm trying to figure out.
Oh yeah. As people who've worked with people from all generations, we know that there are some differences that just are going to happen. But there's also room for you to do your work too. It's not just, and it's not just, oh, it's because they're older.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, right? Is like, that's why it's so important to like, no matter who your manager is, what kind of person they are, what age they are. You also don't want to be ageist, right? Just always like, if you know something is going to happen, if you know a change is coming, if you know, like, if there's anything that if it's something that you know in your mind that, like, is possibly going to be an issue when you bring it up, or is going to affect your job, or how, you know, people see you, your manager sees you, how they deal with it, what they do with that information, or if it, you know, usually it's about, like, availability or something like that. If you know in your, if you think that, then it means that it's something that you should probably bring up as soon as possible, right? Like, it's something that they're also going to think the same thing if you put that on it, if that makes sense, right? Like, like always bring things up to your managers or whoever as soon as you can. Like, if you know that something's, you know, I don't know, you're getting your wisdom teeth taken out in 2 months and you have a
family vacation.
Anything like that, even if you're not meant to like book it off right now, or you don't know how long you're gonna need yet, bring it up, let them know, have it in writing. Always, this is my one like corporate thing. Also, my corporate
have it in writing.
Have it in writing. Always have things in writing, because like, just make sure you like give a heads up. You can say like, hey, like I know I'm going to like I'm going to request this later on, but I just thought, because I know now and I know it's going to affect like that week, because I won't be able to work for most of it or something like that, you know, things like that. Like, just want to give you a heads up. Like, it might not make a difference for the manager.
Like, okay,
it might not make a difference. They might be like, cool, or they might be like it's not an issue right now.
Like, let me start asking somebody to cover it. Like,
exactly. Or it, you know, puts in their head like, I'm going to make a note of this, so when I do the schedule for that week, I at least know, right? I don't need to make the schedule and then, you know, you come back to them and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, actually this is happening, and then that causes more of an issue.
Versus, right? Oh, do you remember like oh, I don't know if you remembered or like this or something like that. Like it's already been a conversation, just a little slip up versus a new.
Usually that's not an issue. It's just kind of like something you need to deal with. And the manager usually won't think that that's an issue either. It's just like, oh, shoot. Yeah, okay. Sorry. It was an oversight. Or like,
sorry about
that was so long ago. We're going to deal with it versus frustration.
I was like, why didn't you tell me? My least favorite is when people forget to book off like things like graduations. Like things like oh,
big important
you know you're graduating, like you know, you know there's a date for this a long time ago. This is when your mom said we're doing a family dinner. Like you knew this, so then it's like that's on us to say. Yeah, not that is on the manager.
Exactly, it's on us to say, and and especially when it comes to. I don't know, this is a completely different thing that I won't go too much into, but like, like when you call into work, right? When you're trying to switch, like, especially in a job where you have to like ask someone to cover your shift. That's something that like, as someone who was in management for retail, I had to deal with a lot. And it's hard to figure out how to make sense of things a lot of the time in those jobs and those situations when like, it's your responsibility to find someone to cover your shift if you can't make it, that kind of thing. And having to enforce that is also difficult. Most of the time.
It sucks for everybody.
But when you have those reasons, right? It's like, oh, I got scheduled this day, but that is my graduation, but that's my sister's wedding, that's my cousin's wedding, or I'm out of town. It's like, what? Why? Okay.
Why didn't you say?
At this point, like that is going to be an issue because it is your responsibility to, do that for yourself, right? Like you're not. It's okay if you don't care about the, especially if you just work retail or customer service or something. It's okay if you don't care about the overall like business in a sense, right?
People. Like,
of course you want to make sure that you're, doing your best and doing things for the, But again, like boundaries, like that is a part of boundaries, right? Like you need to bring that up as soon as you can, or be communicative about those things so that you don't put yourself in that situation, because no one's gonna like it. Not just a older generation manager. A lot of the time, even your coworkers, if they hear about it, they might not be happy about that either. They might be like, dude, why did you do that? So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your advice and I think people can probably relate to a lot of what you're sharing, no matter like the generation or the job experience. It's a mix of practical, but also a mix of like internally you need to get confident in yourself to
a lot of internal
be perceived and trusted as a good employee. It's not just I'm going to do all these tasks really perfectly, because I have seen that people who are just check marking boxes at their job doing really good, but it doesn't come from a confident place, or it doesn't come from like
sometimes
an intentional place.
I see people doing things that way and I envy them a little bit, but then at the same time I'll like think about it more and I'm like, you know what, I'm glad that I don't do that. And some people it works for some people, right? And it works in certain jobs and situations, but either way, like all of those other things that we're talking about, where like those are the things that matter, like what you do with these situations and how you respect your time, your peers' time, and
it's there are jobs where I've been like, oh, I'm just gonna like show up and do my thing, but it's because I'm working on something else, or because it's that kind of job where it's like you just pick up the phone and you hang out and you don't have to go above and beyond, and that's okay too. Like
not every job is the same, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just kind of play it by situation, but also don't be scared to show up and be good.
Don't be afraid to show up and like be the best version of yourself in that situation, when when it's something that if it matters to you, then if it matters to you, then try to do that. If it makes you feel bad that you're not trying, maybe it's not the place that you should be at, or maybe then it is important for you personally to try to, I don't know if that's coming out properly,
Well, it makes sense. Especially if it feels like internally good, I think, to do good and to be recognized. We're all people who want to be recognized for what we do and want good reputations.
Yeah. Like I feel like in the past, if I've had jobs where I don't really need to do much thinking, I don't really need to care, no one else really cares, and I'm like, okay, sure, I guess I'll just do that. There's not much I need to push myself with, and then pretty quickly I'm like, I don't like this. You know, like I would rather be somewhere where I actually do care and I do want to do more and I do want to develop myself, and sometimes it is just that way, and it's good.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you coming on the pod, repeat guest and big sister to us all. I will link kind of some of the I'll just like note some of the topics that we mentioned in the episode to help people know kind of it's beyond if you already have a job or if you don't, or beyond corporate jobs and retail, etc., because we do have between the two of us a good mix of experience. But yeah, email us or message us on Discord or Instagram or TikTok, and if you have any questions for Aina, I will pass them to her. If you have questions for me, I will answer them as well. Sure. But have a good rest of your day.
Have a good day. Thanks for having me.